everything should influence what you do. My advice to anyone who wants to write about football is don't just watch football.
What's your normal process of working on a weekend, covering the game? What does it look like for Carl Anka watching a key stakes game like this for Manchester United?
First question: am I at home or am I away?
If you're away.
If I'm away, okay.
Yeah.
So, well, the Manchester derby technically counts as home because I don't have to leave Manchester to cover it. So I'm based in Manchester.
Smart tactic.
I'm based in Manchester. So one thing that's I try and often do for away games in particular is get to the ground around about 2 hours before kickoff.
Okay.
So team sheets, team lineup come out an hour before kickoff. So you want to try and get there for 2 hours. Sometimes, if possible, you want to do a lap around the ground, get a feel for what's going on, get a feel for what football fans are saying, what things are being said by season ticket holders, home section, away section. If it's an away game, especially, I make sure I don't have my headphones in. One of my favorite creators, film people ever is Werner Herzog. He was big on traveling on foot, reading as much as you can. When he says when you're traveling on foot, the importance of traveling on foot is so you can overhear what other people are saying, because then you understand what people in that area are thinking. So very often, if I'm on the train and a bunch of football fans come on, first instinct, take my headphones off. What chants are they saying? Who do they think is good? Who do they think is bad? What's their big narratives and whatnot? So that informs my writing. Get to the ground. Most football stadiums give the journalists a bit of food before, have a bit of food, jump on the Q&A section of The Athletic, talk to the football fans. I don't necessarily want to get dragged into questions of team lineup before the team lineup is brought up. I know loads of people go, "Oh, Carl, who do you think is going to start?" My answer is, well, let's wait until the lineup happens.
Like me, no need to overthink it.
The joy of football is, if you want, you can think about that thing 25 hours a day, 8 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to only think about it, let's say, 10 hours a day and 6 days a week.
Yeah.
So I answer as many questions as I can beforehand, wait for the lineup. I can make a pretty good estimate of what Manchester United lineup's going to operate on, depending on certain things, based on my history of certain things. Then when it's the opposition, depending on the opposition, I know certain teams in the Premier League quite well. I know certain teams in the Premier League not that well. A team like Brighton under Graham Potter, even though I knew it pretty well, Graham Potter used to do 3 or 4 or 5 tactics, so I'd often have to go over to the Brighton person and go, "What do you think this lineup means?" Loads of scribbles, loads of notes. And then I'd say about half an hour before kickoff, maybe 20 minutes before kickoff, go to my seat, watch the warm up, see who's doing what, see who's doing shooting drills, see who's talking to who's having pats with who. Then you get into the game. I'm going to ask you a question now. When you watch a game of football, what are you looking at?
So this is something that I've been saying a lot this year. So because I'm a football scout and I'm a football coach as well, I watch it as a scout. So I watch it as a coach as well. I no longer watch it as a football fan. So when I'm watching, like, prime example, I went with my sister to watch Man United versus Brighton last season, and I'm looking at how
4-0 or the 2-0?
2-0 at home with Ronaldo and Bruno Fernandes. So I'm watching it as a coach, and I'm like in the south stand looking next to Ralph Rangnick and Graham Potter, and I'm looking at how I'm looking at the pressing triggers. I'm looking at how they're setting up from the back. I'm looking at how Ronaldo, Fernandes, and Sancho are looking at getting past like Lewis Dunk and Veltman at the back as well. I'm looking at how they're going to beat this axis, this 3-on-2 that they have as well. So I'm looking at all of these different things. I'm looking at where the keeper's starting from, why he's placing the ball in a certain area. I'm curious in that way as well. I can no longer see the game as a fan anymore. I always see it from a coach's perspective or a scout's perspective as well. So I'm wondering why Leandro Trossard is still not picked up as a top winger in the Premier League or a top up-and-coming winger in the Premier League. So that's just my thought process personally.
Okay. Yeah. So I ask a lot of people, when you watch a game of football, what are you looking at? Because different people look at different things. Mm-hmm. Different people, when I watch football and I'm not on work mode, I'm looking at certain things. When I watch football in work mode and I've had 2 coffees, that's completely different from me watching football. When I'm not in work mode, I'm at the pub and I've had 3 pints of Guinness, so to speak. But I'm much like you. I am looking for broadly speaking, I'm looking for patterns. I'm looking for repeated patterns. I'm looking for disruption of patterns. I'm trying to see if certain patterns are deliberate. I'm trying to see if certain things are accidental. I'm trying to see if certain things are a reaction to something that's already happened. I am often monitoring. So the press box in Old Trafford is to the back and to the right-hand side of what used to be the home dugout, which is now the away dugout.
Yeah.
So for much of last season, I was waiting and watching to see when the Manchester United manager would get out of their seat and go towards the dugout, because both men, all three men who were in charge of Manchester United last season, tended to sit for chunks of the game rather than stand on the dugout for 90 minutes. So I was
to use my example as well with Graham Potter, he was standing for 90 minutes and his assistant would come to him for as well from the bench, like sending notes to him and saying, this is what you can do. I remember vividly looking in the first half to my right-hand side, just seeing a view of the pitch, and then in the foreground, just Graham Potter with his arms folded.
Yeah, so I'm looking at stuff like that. Before kickoff, I tend to have a phone call with my editor at The Athletic, and we go. So The Athletic don't do typical match reports. While we'll tell you what the score was, we often try and tell you the story behind the story, which is a big thing for us. So when Manchester United played Arsenal, I went, yeah, okay, Man United beat Arsenal 3-1. Raheem, why did I say Raheem Sterling? That was an odd one. Marcus Rashford got 2 goals. Bruno Fernandes had a really great game. But for me, the thing that was really important to write about was Christian Eriksen. Christian Eriksen's impact on the game. So rather than write 1,000 words of A, B, C, D, here's a match summary, it was just, this is why Christian Eriksen is really important to Manchester United going forward. So to do that, there was a point, I'd say, maybe 35 minutes into the game against Arsenal, I went, I'm going to watch Christian Eriksen for a bit now and not really occupy myself with what's going on in the back four, or what's going on set pieces, whatever. I'm just going to watch Christian Eriksen's movement. I'm looking at how he's scanning the pitch. I'm looking at when he's passing to the final third. I'm looking at when he's passing backwards. I'm doing certain things like that. I'm taking notes. Now, if Arsenal had turned it to 2-2 and made it 3-2, all those Christian Eriksen notes would have gone, right, okay, I'm going to have to throw these out, or I'm going to have to save these later and write the story of how that happened as well. So when you watch a game, you want to be inquisitive. You want to have an idea about what you want to write about. You also don't want to be too fixed on it. I've said 2 or 3 times, the scoreline I find the most difficult to write about is the 1-1, because you go, they were good for a bit, and then they weren't good for a bit, and then the score ended 1-1. It's like quite hard to get a proper through line on a 1-1.
Yeah.
Not in it. Well, if a game finishes 0-0, you either talk about resilient defending or you talk about inefficiency in front of goal. Is the
lack of presentation, basically.
Your score finishes 2-2, then you can talk about momentum shifts. If it's 3-3, blah blah blah, and there's that. Whereas the 1-1 is often like, okay, this is a hard needle to thread. So yeah, that is my general sort of approach. The entire game, I'm sure if you follow me on Twitter, I'd probably chuck out 12 to 24 tweets throughout the game, full time, go into press conference mode, talk to the manager about things. I haven't really had much use of the mix zone because of COVID, not because I don't like the mix zone, but because it was shut for the last 2 and a bit seasons. Then I jump back in the Q&A section of The Athletic, and then I'll probably make my way home and start writing what I call draft 1.5.
1.5. I'm looking to hear about this again.
I probably do draft 1.5 of the article I'm doing.
How long does that actually take you to do? Because again, like you said with The Athletic as well, it's the fact that it's not getting the content out quick. It's about getting it out with a proper substance, with some style, with some character as well, which I really like to see and really like to hear as well, and like to read about it, which is the best thing for me personally.
There are some journalists out there who can write amazing football pieces and get that out at full time. I think Daniel Story at the I paper is fantastic at doing on-whistle reports. Jonathan Liu at the Guardian is amazing for doing things on the whistle. Barney Ronay can be really, really good. Jonathan Liu can be really good. I am of a certain age where I was reared on the writing of Henry Winter. And there are some very good people that can write great stuff on 90 minutes. And there have been times when I've asked, I've been asked to write pieces for full time. I did that for the majority of Euro 2020 covering England. Well, I did a lot of collaborative articles, and we got those out for full time covering England as well.
Fantastic.
So my first season at the Athletic, if I went to a Saturday 3 p.m., I often wouldn't have to hand in the article until Sunday 10 o'clock in the morning, which often meant I could watch the game in the stadium, do the first draft, get back to my house or the hotel I was staying at overnight, watch match of the day, see what the punditry was saying on match of the day, consult a bunch of data, whatnot I got, make phone calls to 3 or 4 people if I thought something was worth talking about for the human angle, try and type up notes I might have got for the mix zone and whatnot. And then I could do my second or third or maybe even fourth draft in the morning after I've watched match of the day, maybe for the second time.
That's what I wanted to ask you as well, Carl. Does media punditry influence your writing as well?
I think, everything influences your writing.
Like, if you went to the game, like you said, you've had your whole match day experience. Do you ever go back and be like, I specifically need to watch match of the day to see what Alan Shearer is saying and Jermaine Jeunesse is saying? Or could you do without it on like a match of the day too, if it's a Sunday? And without watching what Gary Neville says as well?
How do I put this? So that was season 1. That was 1920. That was my first season working full-time covering Southampton Football Club, which was a football club that I treated my season at Southampton much like a master's degree.
Yeah.
So I didn't support Southampton. I knew certain things about Southampton, and before I went to live in Southampton, I did loads and loads of research. I talked a lot to the historians of the football club. I bought loads of books. I played a season and a bit with Southampton on FIFA, on legendary mode.
That's what I'm talking about.
On legendary mode, because I knew I'm good at FIFA, but I didn't want to cheat by playing good FIFA skills. I wanted to learn, I didn't want Southampton to win the Premier League. I wanted Southampton to, how does this shape work? And
what do you play on, PlayStation, PC, or Xbox?
I've got all the consoles.
Oh my days!
In a former life, I was a video game journalist.
So that's crazy.
I'd say in my first season at Southampton, I was often trying to absorb as much information as possible because it wasn't necessarily the thing I knew most about. Yeah. And I knew when I was covering Southampton, there were journalists that had forgotten way more about the ins and outs of Southampton Football Club than I did. And very much, I think, humility and asking for help is very important. So while I was handing in articles before match of the day was finished, Southampton tended to be the last club on match of the day. And I would also take notes of that stuff as well. So it's a thing of, some of it influences, some of it will also inform what you want to do later on. So I could hand in my piece on a Southampton Football Club, or now I cover Manchester United. I could hand in my piece before match of the day or before Monday Night Football discusses it. But if, say, Gary Neville, or Jamie Carragher, Ian Wright, Gary Nicholl, or Alan Shearer say something that's interesting about the thing I'm covering on that television show, I will take a note of it.
Okay.
Or if I find out something is being mentioned on foreign television, I'll go off and chase that as well. And I think everything should influence what you do. My advice to anyone who wants to write about football is don't just watch football. Don't just read. If you're going to read sports writers, don't just read football writers. Read what basketball journalists are saying. Read how cricket writers explain stuff. Cricket writers are just phenomenal because there's just so much space you have to fill. And they go, well, I'm going to tell you an amazing story. I love listening to cricket on the radio. I think if you want to write a very good profile of a football player, in like one football player, and you want to tell the story of why they're good, you should probably read a lot of boxing writing, because boxing writing is very good at describing a solo individual. If you want to talk about footballers' injuries and what it's like coming back from injuries, you should probably read NFL, because NFL players are constantly breaking down. And there is some really good writing about NFL players and how they recover from themselves, and they describe how isolating rehab is, and that is a really good way to inform your writing about a player that's torn their ACL as well. So I often cherry pick and take influences from loads of different places. I think there's been a good in recent weeks, since The Athletic has been acquired by the New York Times. I've been going through the New York Times' film review archive.
Okay.
And it's just a very good way of describing good football players by just going, all right, to borrow a classic film review, so-and-so is playing like is a description of Nicolas Cage in this movie.
Good excuse to use Nicolas Cage in that film.
Good excuse to use Nicolas Cage. I think I used the description of Nicolas Cage's performance in Bad Lieutenant.
Oh my days.
I used that to describe Frankie de Jong at Ajax recently.
That's crazy. It's a nice way as well, because you can kind of link it to how rappers are using their lyrics to link it to football as well, which is another way of linking. Probably not on the same length, but it's just in terms of linking one to another as well.
I did a tweet about how Jadon Sancho dribbles a bit like a veteran rapper, and I think it didn't go down well with too many people, but I stand by it.
Yeah, it's a throwback in a way from looking at what traditional wingers used to dribble like as well. So it goes to show how many people don't really get that praise that you just gave them as well.